Hello everybody, this is Mr. Storm. In this lesson we are going to talk about variables. Variables are essentially the building blocks of any program. Variables allow us to store data and then use that data later in many different ways. So let's talk very simply about how to use a variable and how they're used in a program. So notice I have my hello world program here. I have a console.writeLine statement, and maybe I want to, instead of say hello world, maybe I want to say hello and then the user's name, right? Well, what I can do is I don't know what the user's name is, right? So I need to store their name in something called a variable. Variable is just data that can change. It's essentially a box that holds a specific kind of data inside, and then we can dump that box out whenever we want, right? So the first step to creating a variable is we have to indicate the type of variable that we want to create. Now by type, I mean what kind of data are we going to store in that variable. So there are four main types of data that we're going to look at in this class. Actually five main types of data. So we have string data. A string is essentially like a string of characters. They can just be alphanumeric characters. So a string, something like a name, like David. So that would be a variable. This is a string variable, indicated that it is a string by the keyword, and then we've given it a name. Now it's important to remember that variable names can be anything you want them to be, but it's always best to name your variables something that relates to what is going to be stored in there. So are we using this variable to store a name? Well, then let's put name in there. Then we have an equal sign, and what's to the left of the equal sign is the box we're going to put the information in. So it's the string name box. And then to the right of the equal sign is the data we're going to put into that box. So the data that we're going to put in there is the word David. Okay, well, what are some other variable types that we're going to use? Well, we might, instead of having a string of characters, maybe we just want one character. In that case, we will use char. So maybe for one character, maybe I want to store a gender, male, female, or non-binary, or whatever, right? So I'm going to put single quotes for a char variable, and I will say M for male, meaning I am male, right? So now we have a variable that holds the name, David. We have a variable of a char type that holds the gender, which is M for male. So another variable type we might use is an integer. An integer is a whole number. It's a number that cannot be a decimal number. So an int or integer, this could be something like your birthday, right? Birthday is a whole, or not birthday, but let's say age. Age is a whole number, right? I put R. Age, I am 35. Now notice that I didn't put any quotes around that. And Replit actually recognized that it was a number and it highlighted it lime green, so it stood out. So let's see. We have a string, which is a series of alphanumeric characters. We have a char, which is a single character. We have a whole number. After that, maybe we want to talk about a number that can be a decimal. Those are called a float or floating point numbers, right? So a float, and for float, it could be something like your GPA, right? GPA, maybe I have a low GPA. I have a 3.1 GPA, right? So notice that point means that it's a floating point number. Now, it's important to remember that floats don't necessarily have to have a decimal. You can have a float that starts out as a whole number, but then as you do division or mathematic problems with it, it becomes a number that has a decimal. Floats will allow you to have a decimal. Integers will not, okay? So those are the 4 types. We need an extra type. There's one more type that we want to talk about, and it's actually a bool or Boolean. Bool is essentially a variable type that will hold either true or false, right? It's only those two. It can only be true or false. So I'm going to say alive. True. I am alive. I'm speaking to you right now. So these are the 5 main variable types that we will be using in this class. There are other variable types out there, obviously, but these are the 5 that we are going to focus on. Okay. So let's say below here, let's say I want to use this variable name, so the string variable called name, and I want to allow the user to type in their name into this variable, right? We've assigned it some data, but we can overwrite that data by allowing our user to type into the screen. I can also overwrite the data by just saying name equals Dawn. Like maybe I've changed my name. I decided I want to be female, and I changed my name to Dawn. There we go. Now notice that I didn't have to type string again. It's because this name or this variable already exists. Once I've created the variable, I don't have to then tell it it's a string type every single time. Now if I do, it should throw up an error if I run my code. Let's see. See, there's an error. It says local variable named name is already defined in the scope. What that's telling me is that I already have a variable called name. You can only have one variable of the same name in your program. So you can only have one variable called gender, only one variable called age, only one variable called GPA, only one variable called boogers. Whatever it is that you name your variables, if you try to create a second variable with the same name, you'll get this error. You'll get this pink text thrown up in your console. So I'm going to get rid of that. So let's say instead of me as the programmer, instead of me replacing what's in the name variable, what if I want to let my user put in their name? Well, instead of name equals Dawn, I can say name equals console.readLine. Now what that's going to do is it's going to say, I want to put something new in the name variable. And the new thing I want to put in there is whatever the user types onto the screen. Okay? Now, putting it in the variable is one thing. Then we need to actually use that information. Now up here, I can already tell that it's going to be a bit confusing for my user because there's no instruction. So I'm going to put another console WriteLine here. Console.WriteLine. What is your name? Okay, so console.WriteLine, what is your name? And then they enter their name. And then I can say console.WriteLine. And instead of typing in some words in the quotes, I can actually just type the name of the variable so that whatever's inside that variable gets dumped back out on the screen. So, name. So again, notice I didn't put the quotes in there. And if I click on the variable, it will highlight wherever that is in my program. So let's see how this program works. I'm going to click run. Oh, hello. Oh, I see. So there's an error here. It's saying that my floating point number, there's an error with my float. I forgot to do one very important thing with floats. With a float, you always have to have the lowercase f after the number, just to indicate that it's a floating point number. Okay, now all of these errors are popping up. These are essentially just saying, hey, you created some variables, but you never actually use them in your program. So if you see these are just warnings. Notice how they're white text. The white text just means it's a warning, but I don't like these. I want to get rid of them. So I'm actually going to go in here and get rid of every variable that I'm not using. Now let's stop the program and run it again. Okay, so it says, hello world, what is your name? So in here, I'm going to type, my name is Booger Steve. Oh, I put Booger Stever. So notice that it just put exactly what I typed right back on the screen. Well, that's not very fun. I want to say a message, a personalized message to the person that I'm talking to. Well, here's how we can mix some text with the variable. So I can say something to the effect of, hello. Oh, hello. Now, what I'm doing here is I've typed hello, comma, and a space. The space is important. If you don't put the space, it'll smush everything together and it won't look very good in your output. So I've put hello and then space, or hello, comma, space in between the quotes. Remember, if it's in between the quotations, it will display exactly the way you wrote it on your screen. So it'll put the comma in there, it'll put the space in there. And then I said plus the name variable. Now the plus is important. I'm essentially adding the hello plus whatever's in name. We're adding those together. And in programming, this is actually called concatenation. I'm concatenating this string with another string. I'm adding those strings together. And what that does is it allows me to send a message while using variables within the message. I'm going to add another concatenation. Okay, so now I have a message. It should be a personalized message for your user whenever they use the program. So it says, hello, name, it is very nice to meet you. So let's go ahead and run this program and see if it works. So hello world, what is your name? My name is Barbara. Hello, Barbara. It is very nice to meet you. So you see how that works? So now with this, I didn't need to know that the user was going to type Barbara. All I needed was to give the user the ability to do that. And they added whatever they wanted, right? This is the power of variables. Variables can be used to allow your user to enter information. You can bring that information into the program and then use that information later to personalize the program or do fun things like our Mad Libs program that we're going to work on in just a minute. So let's see. What else do you need to know about variables? Honestly, this is a really fun concept. I want to do this again. I want to explore this again. So let's think of a different thing. Let's do... Let's see. I want to create a new variable. I'm going to call it, I'm going to say int, and I will say I want it to be, I'll say age. No. Height. And instead of int, I'm going to make it a float because heights are usually decimals. Float, height. And now notice that I didn't give it any data. I didn't put any data in it because if I'm going to ask my, like I did up here, right? I put some data in there right away. If I'm going to ask my user, you know, how tall they are, then I don't actually need to put data in the variable right away. So console.writeLine. Now with this float, I'm actually going to want to put in some data to initialize it now that I think about it, because I want to make sure I get that F in there just so that it's formatted properly. All right, how tall are you? Height equals console.readLine. Now, here's a problem. This isn't actually going to work. Whenever we bring in information on a read line, it comes in as a string. And so if it's coming in as a string, it's not really going to be able to go into a variable that is a float, right? So what we need to do is we need to parse this. We need to parse the string. So let's do try parse. Let's see if that actually works. I think that's incorrect, but we'll see what happens. Yep, we've got all kinds of stuff. Actually, I think I remember how to do it. Let's do try parse. The first thing is out, and the variable we want it to go out to is going to be height. Oh, it's float.tryParse, and then console.read line. Let's see if that works. I might be wrong, but you know, I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Let's see. String out to a float. Okay. Does not require an out modifier. Maybe I got these backward. Console. And then here, let's try. Let's try that. See if that works. Hey, okay, so no errors, so at least maybe it might work. So what is your name? Fart. Hello, Fart. It is really nice to meet you. How tall are you? I'm 2 foot 78 inches. So it actually got in there. It actually worked. So let's talk about this parse statement here really quickly, because it is kind of important. So again, I was trying to put in data that was coming in as a string, and I was trying to put it into the wrong data type variable, right? This variable is a float. I was trying to put it into a float, even though it was a string, which that's not going to work. So we have to do something called parsing. So you're going to need this complicated thing here in order to make it work. So here's what it is. You start with the type of data you want to turn it into. So in this case, I wanted to turn it into a float. And then you have the period, and then the keyword try parse. And then inside the parentheses, we're going to have these two arguments. The first thing, the first argument, is what data are we going to try to parse? And for our information, for our program, the data was this console read line, meaning whatever the user typed into the screen. And then the next argument is, where is it going to go? What variable are we going to put that into? And so it's this out keyword, and the variable was the height variable. And so once we have collected that information, then we can say console.writeLine, line. Wow. Yeah, let's do. Is super tall. Okay, now let's try that. What is your name? Poop. Hello, Poop. It's very nice to meet you. How tall are you? Oh, I didn't put anything. I put 0. So anyway, so that's essentially how it works, right? We bring in information, we bring in variables from our user types in some stuff, and then we can use that later on in the program. So after this, you're going to start working on your Mad Libs program. I will walk you through that program step by step, because it's really important that we get this first project, or the second project, I guess it is, correct. Because if we don't understand these concepts, it's going to be very hard to continue. And next week, we're getting into our first power standard, I believe. So it's really important that we understand these concepts before we move forward. Okay, if you have any questions, please come let me know, or send me an email, and I will help you get through this material. Again, it's really important that you understand this stuff. So if you're struggling with it at all, please let me know. All right, that's it for me. Peace.